The case I'm about to tell you is almost unbelievable and takes the expression announced crime to another level. On November 30th, 2021, a mass shooting took place at Oxford High School in Michigan, United States. Ethan Robert Crumbley, 15 years old, armed with a 9mm semi-automatic pistol, killed 4 students and injured 8 others, including a teacher. Authorities arrested the teenager and charged him as an adult with 24 crimes, including terrorism, which appears to be unprecedented in this type of case and attack. Ethan pleaded guilty to all charges in October 2022 and then at his sentencing in December 2023. The teenager was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole, plus an additional 24 years in jail. That's right, abductees. Even though the United States unfortunately leads in school attacks, we bring up this case because of its many particularities which led to an unusual outcome, with the trial of the shooter's parents as well and the school being sued. The issues raised here are related to what the possible ways to confront this type of violence would be. Here in Brazil, for example, last November, the Ministry of Education proposed 13 measures to the federal government for the prevention and combat of attacks in schools. Are you aware of this? Yeah, so do a quick search on Google. It's important to know about some of these proposals. Alright, I'm Marcos Campos. Welcome everyone. If you like learning about real stories, true crimes, mysteries, I invite you to subscribe and follow the channel. Every week there are several new episodes here. If you can, consider joining our members club, because that directly helps with the production of our content. If you can't, that's fine. Leave a like or comment, even just an emoji. Staying until the end is a big help and really supports our channel. That's it then. Announcements made. Let's get to the facts. As you'll see throughout the episode, this attack at Oxford High School is a disturbing story of neglect by the adults who interacted with Ethan, the teenager. It's nothing, you know? They keep ignoring it, just going along as if it's like, oh, just a drawing, just a phrase, and so on. But this account also puts underage offenders on a different level when it comes to their parents' responsibilities. On the Oxford High School website over in Michigan, we found, in addition to the usual information about school community life, such as sports events, upcoming theater performances, information for parents and teachers, there is a temporary memorial for the victims of the 2021 shooting. It was on November 3rd, 2021, around 10 to 1 in the afternoon, precisely at 12:51 post-meridian, that the local police started receiving calls on 911, the emergency number in the United States, about a shooting that was happening at the school. The response was immediate, and within 3 minutes after the rescuers arrived, Ethan was arrested unharmed. He still had 7 rounds loaded in his gun and 2 magazines with 15 rounds each. In a press conference, Oakland County Under Sheriff Michael McCabe said that the shooter surrendered to the police without any incident. The entire shooting lasted about 5 minutes and took place at the far south end of the school building. Later, investigators were able to reconstruct the sequence of events through footage from the school's internal surveillance cameras, which showed Ethan Robert Crumbley entering a bathroom and coming out from inside it. After about a minute, holding a semi-automatic pistol, immediately afterward, Ethan started shooting in the hallway, just as hundreds of students were transitioning from one classroom to another. With the sound of gunshots, screams, and running, all the students started to flee, seeking refuge and protection. At the same time, the shooter walked down the hallway and fired at the classrooms and at the students who couldn't hide in time. Ethan's actions were described as methodical and deliberate, meaning he seemed calm and controlled throughout the entire attack. He was doing that consciously. Planning, in other words. Planning, I'm not sure. Maybe something triggered him, but he was confident in his actions. Later, he stated that when he went into the bathroom and retrieved his weapon, And he even put pieces of toilet paper in his ears to muffle the sound of the shots, which he knew would be very loud. Anyway, this proves that he was actually there, with everything already planned out in his mind. According to the students, through the school's sound system, everyone was immediately alerted about the presence of an active shooter. With that, the teachers started locking the classrooms, putting up barricades on the doors, and covering the windows. This quick response to the threat prevented an even greater loss of lives. It's all very surreal, isn't it, guys? Imagine the sound system announcing that there's an active shooter inside the school. Like, that alone makes us think it's something common, doesn't it? Isn't that surreal? Hey, be alert, it could happen. It's also worth mentioning, folks, that at first, the students thought it was a drill, some kind of simulation, a dangerous situation. But even in the midst of all that confusion and uncertainty, the important thing is that Ethan wasn't able to get into any classroom. Other teenagers mentioned that they heard loud noises, but they didn't immediately think they could be gunshots. Either way, they followed the instructions to stay in their classrooms and lock the doors for their own safety. A boy who was there alone in the bathroom at the time of the attack heard those sounds, which he thought could be gunshots fired right there, very close to him. That's why he stayed crouched inside in one of those stalls in the bathroom, right, with a door. Only then, when the school was quieter, safer, with the police present and the shooter detained, that's when this boy opened the door and finally got out of there. Then, this student found several bodies lying on the floor in that hallway, right where he was about to walk through. After the shooting, the school was quickly evacuated. Students were taken to a large store nearby, and even neighbors took in children until their parents arrived. The objectives were basically two: to prevent students from being exposed to violent scenes of injured and dead classmates, and to keep the students safe, while authorities were sweeping the school for possible other shooters, weapons, and evidence. Some posts about this attack were made in real time by students who were hiding in classrooms. Even when the police arrived and informed them that the doors could be opened and the students could leave the locked classrooms, there was a lot of fear and suspicion that the voice could be the shooter, trying to trick those inside the classrooms. Later, Sheriff Bouchard, during a press conference, clarified that Ethan was already in custody and outside the school. When the officers informed the students and teachers locked inside that the school was now safe and that the doors could be opened, the full investigation work explored all the security camera footage from the school building. It was clear that Ethan acted alone in this attack, and not in a pair, as has happened in other similar cases of school attacks carried out by two partner shooters. It was also clear that Ethan had a clear intention to kill his victims, since he aimed at the head and chest of each of his victims, right, and shot them almost at point-blank range. He also shot at the locked doors, trying to hit and injure the people who were, hiding inside those rooms where he fired. After that, a search warrant was also executed at Ethan's family home, where a cell phone, a diary, several long guns, and other items were seized. All of this is already part of the investigation into the shooting. The boys' social media accounts were searched, including older posts. The cell phone had 2 videos of Ethan, both recorded the night before the shooting. And in these videos, he allegedly announced the attack he would carry out at the school the next day. The media at the time even added, a note saying that the boy had said the following: I hope, quote, I hope my shooting causes the American president to be impeached. The investigators questioned Ethan's parents during the search of their house, and the information they obtained was quite surprising. Soon, I'll talk more about this with you, okay? Guys, I'm going to introduce to you now the victims of this attack. Madison Baldwin, 17 years old. Tate Meyer, 16 years old. Hannah St. Juliana, 14 years old. These 3 died at the scene. And Justin Tilling, 17 years old, who passed away 2 days later at the hospital where he was treated. In addition to them, 7 students were hit and injured, as well as 1 teacher. However, all of them survived. So guys, we've already talked here on the channel about some national cases of attacks on schools, right? A very disturbing topic within this universe of real crimes. But, as I said at the beginning of the episode, what will be reported from now on borders on the unbelievable and really takes the expression announced crime to another level. It is publicly reported that the police said there was no evidence that Ethan faced disciplinary problems at school before the shooting. However, we are certain that this information is false. Because as we get to know a bit of his story, it's impossible to believe that there weren't negative effects on his interactions and relationships at school. The prosecutor, Karen MacDonald, presented the timeline of events leading up to the attack. Take a look. On November 29th, the day before the shooting, school staff spoke with Ethan after a teacher saw the teenager using his cell phone during class to search for information about buying ammunition. When he was questioned about it, Ethan explained his interest in buying ammunition because he and his mother, Jennifer, had recently visited a shooting range, and according to him, shooting sports were a family hobby. But since he was only 15 years old, that seemed a little strange, didn't it? Even within the context of the United States. So the school staff left a voicemail for his mother and sent her an email about this matter, certainly questioning whether the explanation that Ethan had given was true or not. We know that Jennifer Crumbley did not respond to those messages she received. Far from it, actually. She sent a direct text message to her son, and the message she sent to Ethan already starts off in a really bizarre way. You know that acronym LOL, which is widely used on social media in the United States? That means laughing out loud, which is like laughing out loud in Portuguese. More or less, it's an expression, right? It starts like this, in quotes, "Laugh out loud, I'm not mad at you, you just have to learn not to get caught." End quote. At the very least, it's strange, isn't it, guys? Unless the person is already a bit off the rails. That's not funny at all, right? To start this message this way. What also shows, or rather makes it clear, is that the boy's family really didn't see his worrying behavior as actually worrying, right? Well, on November 30th then, following the chronological order, the day of the shooting, another teacher found a very disturbing, violent drawing on Ethan's desk. Look at this photo, see what he drew. It's a pistol, isn't it? Pointing to the words, "The thoughts won't stop, help me." In another part of this note, there was a drawing of a bullet with the following words above the bullet, "Blood everywhere." Between the drawing of the gun and the bullet, there's also a drawing of a person who seems to have been shot. They're bleeding. Below this figure, there's also a drawing of an emoji, a smile. Further below this drawing are the words, "My life is useless," and to its right are the words, "The world is dead." It was a teacher who took this photo of the drawing and reported Ethan to the school administration, and so he would have been taken to the school counselor's office. Several people at the school were aware of the situation. So, it was decided to call Ethan's parents, asking them to come to the school while they waited for the boy's parents to arrive, right? No one thought he actually posed an imminent danger, so much so that the parents were only advised to seek psychological counseling for their son within 48 hours. Otherwise, the school would call Child Protective Services. Ethan's father and mother resisted the idea that he was right. At that moment, he was being sent out of class because of a simple drawing. Both his mother and father needed to work that day, and Ethan needed to stay at school. Long story short, guys, the boy went back to the classroom to attend the lessons. The parents were incredibly dishonest for not saying that days earlier they had bought a gun for him. Ethan even posted on social media that he had gotten his 2021 Christmas present early. That's right, folks. The 9mm pistol belonged to Ethan, and that morning, he had already brought the gun into the school, hidden somewhere strategic. It was after that second meeting in the morning, after which Ethan's parents were at the school, that he carried out the shootings at 12:50. About half an hour later, when the news started talking about the attack at Oxford High School, Mrs. Jennifer Crumbley, Ethan's mother, right, sent a message to her son saying, "Ethan, don't do this." A few minutes passed, and then James Crumbley also called 911 to report that the gun was missing from his house. He also said that his son, Ethan Robert Crumbley, could be the school shooter. Days later, the prosecutor, Karen McDonald, said that school staff had legal grounds to search Ethan's backpack and locker. When those concerns about his behavior were raised, on the morning of the shooting, especially after everyone saw the drawing the teenager had made. Remembering that the incident with the search for buying ammunition had happened the day before, however, the school did not conduct any search. It's scary, right? It makes me feel totally insecure. Because despite the evidence and the signs, it seems like no one takes any action. That actually reminded me of the last attack in Santa Catarina, right? We even did a special episode here on the channel about it. I remember my daughters are in school, right? I remember that all the schools here in the city put security guards at the doors. There was a real concern, right? But you see that it's just a temporary concern, just to give an immediate response. Now it's just one or another that you see out there, so it's that kind of negligence that can be avoided, right? You have to call. Don't wait for it, guys. Yeah, it really makes me mad, The feeling I get is that it seems like nobody really takes these things seriously, That whole idea of it won't happen to me. Despite all the history, right, of shootings in schools. Well, I'm going to tell you a little bit then about what we know about that young man's life. Ethan's biography. Some information is relevant to this sad episode, to put everything into context. Ethan was born in 2006 in Florida, but later his parents moved to other cities. His parents have minor criminal records registered between 1995 and 2005 involving financial fraud and driving under the influence of alcohol or drugs. A former neighbor told reporters that after the family moved to Michigan, the couple Jennifer and James often left Ethan alone at home while they went to bars downtown. The neighborhood became so concerned that they made anonymous phone reports to the State Child Protective Services, but these people didn't know if any action had been taken at the time. Around 2014 and 2015, the most recent information was concerning. According to the prosecutors, Ethan's only friend moved away at the end of October 2021. The family dog died. The teenager was showing signs of depression. Ethan sent his mother disturbing texts about his state of mind, which included claims about demons and ghosts inside the house. He also reportedly filmed himself torturing animals, made Molotov cocktails, and drew a sketch of himself committing a school shooting. Ethan shared this idea with a friend through text messages. The teenager even kept the head of a baby bird in a jar and later placed that jar inside the school bathroom. James Crumbley, Ethan's father, bought the 9mm gun used in the attack at a local gun store on Black Friday, 4 days before the shooting. The parents never sought medical or psychological help for their son, even though they knew about the incidents we just reported to you here. Prosecutor Karen McDonald also clarified that Ethan was with his father at the time the gun was purchased and that he posted about it on social media later that same day. His mother, Jennifer, also referred to the gun in a social media post as Ethan's new Christmas present. Based on recovered shell casings found at the school, authorities believe that at least 30 shots were fired. One of the questions in the case was whether Ethan had taken the gun without his parents' knowledge or if he was in possession of the 9mm, since the weapon had been given to him as a gift. Well, after being detained without offering any resistance, Ethan was charged with homicide and attempted homicide and placed under surveillance at the County Juvenile Detention Center. The authorities were determined to keep him alive, meaning they didn't want him to try to take his own life, as some of these criminals tend to do. At one point, he said he wouldn't consider taking his own life because he didn't want to be forgotten. And staying alive was the best way to be remembered. In other words, history repeats itself, right? We've already seen several cases like this where this kind of being, it seems like he takes pleasure, right? In being remembered for this terrible act he committed. The boy first chose to remain silent. Later, he denied and then admitted to the crimes, always under the guidance of his lawyer. On December 1st, he was charged as an adult with terrorism, such as deaths, first-degree murder, assault with intent to kill, and possession of a firearm during the commission of a crime. According to American news agencies, this appears to be the first time in United States history that a terrorism charge has been brought in connection with a school shooting incident. The terrorism charge is provided for under Michigan law for an act intended to intimidate or coerce a civilian population, in this case the Oxford High School community. Kept in custody, transferred to a jail without bail, Ethan was defended by a court-appointed attorney because his parents hired lawyers for themselves, but they didn't hire a legal defender for their son. This part here, at least for me, makes it clear that this family was completely dysfunctional, right? Each one looking out for their own... You guys got it, right? That lawyer there requested that Ethan be transferred back to the juvenile detention center since he could hear other adults, or that it violated the Michigan statute for minors held in adult facilities. The request was denied, and the assistant prosecutor said he would contact the Oakland County Jail to keep Ethan isolated from the other inmates and their conversations. On January 12, 2022, a not guilty plea was entered on behalf of Ethan Robert Crumbley during his arraignment. A few days later, the defense announced that they would plead insanity, requesting a criminal responsibility evaluation, a standard procedure when the defendant is evaluated by a doctor from the Center for Forensic Psychiatry. 9 months later, after some stalling, let's say, right, or irrefutable evidence against him, Ethan pleaded guilty to all charges and withdrew his intention to pursue an insanity defense. He also admitted during questioning that his own money was used to buy the weapon used. And he also claimed that the weapon was not locked up on the day of the shooting. In other words, access to the weapon inside the house was easy. Finally, in September 2023, almost 2 years after the attack, Judge Kwame Rowe decided that Ethan was eligible for a life sentence without the possibility of parole. In that decision, the seriousness of the crime weighed more than the defendant's young age or his neglected childhood by his parents, James and Jennifer. Not to mention that during the period before Ethan's trial, even while in custody, he managed to use a hacked tablet to access ultra-violent content. Thus, on December 9, 2023, the sentence of life imprisonment without parole was announced. Shortly before the sentencing, Ethan apologized to the community and said that he was truly sorry. Right after Ethan's arrest, prosecutor Karen McDonald said that her office was also considering criminal charges against the teenager's parents. According to her, responsible gun ownership is crucial to preventing tragedies, so those who are irresponsible with their firearms must be held accountable for it. That's right. So, in December 2021, both of Ethan's parents were charged with 4 counts of involuntary manslaughter for their failure to ensure that the gun Ethan used in the shooting was kept in a safe place, out of the teenager's reach. So, this was a rare case of parents being charged in connection with a school shooting. Hours after this announcement, Jennifer and James became wanted by the state police since they did not show up to turn themselves in to the authorities. The terrorism charge brought in the FBI. Along with the FBI, the United States Marshals Service and the Fugitive Apprehension Team from Oakland County began the manhunt for Ethan's parents. The newspapers reported the couple withdrew $4,000 from the bank, which isn't much for 2 people on the run, is it? Immediately then, posters of Jennifer and James were released, and rewards of up to $10,000 were also offered for information that would lead, to their arrests. Around 2 o'clock in the morning on December 4th, the police arrested the couple after finding them in a room on the first floor of a commercial building. Their quick location was the result of anonymous tips regarding their vehicle. It is reported that the Crumbleys were unarmed and desperate when they were arrested, and there was no indication that they had planned to turn themselves into the authorities. Their plan was really to escape. Jennifer and James Crumbley were charged and pleaded not guilty to the charges, and a $500,000 bail was set for each of them. In fact, as already mentioned here, federal prosecutors began investigating whether federal laws were violated when James Crumbley bought a gun for his son. James and Jennifer were held in the Oakland County Jail, where their son was also confined. However, they were not allowed to interact. 30 days after the bail hearing, the judge sided with the prosecutors and refused to lower the bail amount for Ethan's parents, stating that they were a flight risk and that the charges were very serious. Kept in jail for about 2 years until the trial. At the start of 2024, the judge decided Jennifer and James would have separate trials. Jennifer Crumbley's trial ended on February 6, 2024, with the jury finding her guilty on all 4 counts of involuntary manslaughter. Jennifer became the first mother to be convicted for this type of connection and ended up receiving 15 years. Right, for these charges of involuntary manslaughter. Ethan's father, James, got the same sentence as his mother, 10 to 15 years, which is the maximum term. I said the mother got 15 years, but they'll actually spend 10 to 15 years behind bars. And look, still talking about James's responsibility in the 2021 shooting. He told investigators that the gun his son used was hidden in a case and the bullets were stored separately, which was a lie, according to Ethan's testimony. James admitted that his son's school performance was mediocre and that they had argued about Ethan's grades the night before the school massacre, but that everything was fine between them, parents and son, and that the teenager acknowledged he needed to try harder at school. However, another version of Ethan's life was revealed by police investigations in court, and this was presented with the help of a forensic expert who scanned Ethan's text messages. These messages he had sent to a friend about his own mental health and about firearms, conversations that took place months before the attack. During his testimony, Ed, the forensic expert, talked about the more than 20,000 text messages exchanged between the friends from January to October 2021. In these many conversations, Ethan detailed concerns about his own mental health and sent at least one video showing himself with a loaded gun. In early April 2021, Ethan sent a message to a friend saying that he was hearing people talking to him and seeing someone in the distance, like a shadow, a ghost. Actually, quote unquote, I asked my dad to take me to the doctor yesterday, but he just gave me some pills and told me to swallow them. Can you believe it, guys? Quote unquote, too. I'm asking him to take me to the doctor, but my mom laughed when I told her. Parents these days, mercy, right? They're both trash, huh? And at the trial, Jennifer denied that she had laughed and said she didn't think her son was asking for a doctor. It's one person's word against another's, but given the situation, don't you agree? After that friend of Ethan moved away, the conversations between him and Ethan stopped. The teenager only talked to his parents. Later, the authorities would find his diary, which was still in his school backpack. This diary contained 22 pages of handwritten notes and drawings describing how he felt and what he wanted to do to his classmates. Perhaps the most frustrating part of this is the fact that the teachers were aware of these drawings. Ethan Crumbley's drawings told the story of a deeply troubled child. On December 9th, several survivors of the shooting filed 2 $100 million lawsuits against Oxford Community Schools and its staff as a result. At least one lawsuit claimed that school staff did not prevent the shooting because they ignored several warning signs, such as threats posted on social media, which were brought to the school's attention. And in this confusion, the names of former school staff were incorrectly mentioned. And this led some people who were completely uninvolved in the story to be threatened with death by the public. On January 8, 2022, survivors of the shooting filed an updated lawsuit for $100 million, which added 11 new charges against the school staff. The update consisted of naming the principal and other administrators as responsible for gross negligence, claiming that their actions caused severe and permanent physical and emotional trauma. According to the lawsuit, the school staff were aware of the disturbing posts made by Etam on social media, as well as his tendencies toward animal cruelty, but they still allowed him to continue attending school as usual. Allegedly, Teachers and school counselors were discouraged from reporting and confronting the teenagers' bizarre behavior. The institution denied all the accusations. On January 24, 2022, a request was made to suspend the lawsuit against the school until James and Jennifer's criminal trials. A year later, in March 2023, a state judge dismissed the lawsuits against Oxford Community Schools and also its staff. This ruling determines that the school and the staff are immune to liability charges, as only Ethan Robert Crumbley was the direct cause of the shooting. In any case, many students were traumatized by this attack and psychologically affected by the loss of their classmates and by the images of the dead and wounded. With that, the Michigan Department of Health and Human Services provided help and support to the students and their families. More than $3.2 million in resources were approved by the Oakland County Board of Commissioners in response to the needs of these people. The Oxford Community Schools closed their doors for a week, and the plan to resume normal activities included a police presence and a trained medical staff for support. The district superintendent announced that starting in 2022, all elementary school students would be required to use transparent backpacks. Meanwhile, all middle and high school students would be required to keep their backpacks in lockers. Religious services were held at the school as well as a candlelight vigil. A memorial in honor of the victims was created outside the school with flowers, photos, messages, and the traditional stuffed animals. An online petition was started to rename the school's stadium after Tate Meyer, one of the victims killed in the shooting. Several other initiatives also aimed to honor the victims and bring the community together, supporting friends and family members of those who were killed and injured. There was a charitable fundraising effort to cover funeral and hospital expenses. Unfortunately, after this attack, a flood of threats occurred at other schools. Sources say that at least 519 schools in 70 different districts in Michigan and 6 other states remained closed after threats of attacks. Social network companies like Facebook and TikTok were required to remove pages and posts deemed dangerous or promoting such crimes. Definitely, guys, this was not just another report about violence in schools. It was not a school massacre as a response to bullying, nor was it caused by unknown or undiagnosed mental disorders in the person responsible for the crime. And this idea of terrorism, as this attack in Michigan was classified, he questioned the American concept that a threat to national security or internal security needs to be a foreign threat to the country, with a compromise of the government's and society's ability to survive and function, right? In fact, school shootings represent such a constant and serious threat in the United States that they should be considered a matter of national security. And certainly, the exploration of this whole case has revealed new aspects of this major problem. As everyone knows, although frightening, school attacks, like so many other crimes, fade from the public's memory just days after they happen. What we found in our research is that, at the end of 2023, the Ministry of Education proposed measures to the federal government to prevent the risk of massacres in Brazilian schools. This proposal was accompanied by a report mapping out this problem and pointing out some of its causes. And very briefly here for you, between 2002 and 2023, 36 school attacks occurred. The fatal victims were 49 people, with another 115 injured. In 16 attacks, the criminals used firearms. In another 16, bladed weapons were used, and in the remaining 4 cases, other weapons were used. In total, 30 public schools, 40 municipal and 16 state, and 7 private schools were targeted by the criminals. The Aracruz attack in Espírito Santo, late November 2022, claimed victims at 2 schools, and that's just one example for you. There are many measures in this proposal from the Ministry of Education. I'm not even going to list them here, because if you just Google it, you'll easily find them. I believe we've already mentioned here in some episode on the topic that the biggest experts on this subject are the United States, the country where attacks of this kind happen most frequently. In other words, it's hard to be optimistic about simple and easy solutions. The topics addressed by the Ministry of Education are important, and that's indisputable. However, besides the government, what can families do? It's a complex subject, isn't it? Just look at what happened. What were the links in the chain that closed in Ethan's case? Remember that our therapeutic space in the comments is available for us to talk more about this topic, okay? I hope you enjoyed our work today. Thank you for your company and see you in the next episode.